Good morning. You didn't get any mail this morning. You're not likely to get any tomorrow for 2 or 3 days, 2 or 3 weeks, 2 or 3 months, or 2 or 3 years. And if you're sitting at home, you must just scratch your head and say, but Parliament last week passed a law which said that nobody could counsel defiance of the will of the people, that you must go back to work, that the CUPW people must go back to work, and that if they don't go back to work, there's going to be a $10,000 fine in the union and $2,500 a day, $1,000 fine in union officials and $250 a day, and $100 for every union member who defies the law. Why haven't they gone back to work? Well, there are a number of reasons. One of them is that the law ain't that well written because we only have a part-time justice minister. Remember Nanny Lang. He runs the Transport Commission, the biggest single job in government. He runs the Wheat Board, and as a part-time job, he runs the all-important Justice Ministry in this particular hour of national crisis. Now you, as the ordinary joker like myself, a law says you must go back to work. Why don't they go back to work? Why hasn't the government done something in fact? Well, the government could have done something in fact. It could, in the worst analysis, perhaps in the final analysis yet, send out the police to charge people who are breaking the new law laid down by Parliament. But they didn't do that. They've got to take 2 bites at the cherry. So they've passed the law, and the law is flouted, ignored, disobeyed, and the union leaders are saying, we might be out a month. We're not going back to work. The hell with you and your new law. So they go the court route. Instead of using their own authority within the law, to which they are fully entitled, they go to the courts, put it on the back of the courts. And the courts now have to hear injunctions, and the injunctions have to be tried. And what the government hopes is that on the magic passage of the magic injunctions, all pickets will disappear, float away into the night, and the government believes that the vast majority of postal workers will go back peacefully across the line to continue their jobs. I hope they're right, but it's not all that easy, because by now, because of the inept handling by this government for 18 months, some obstructionism by the union, there's no doubt about that, but it's the government who is in charge. They've messed around with this for 18 months. They haven't even yet, since the passage of the law, appointed or named the man who's going to set up the arbitration. They don't know who it is. If it were a first-class guy, the union might be encouraged. If it's a nobody, the union will be very unhappy indeed. Nor did they take the common sense step to set up a public disputes commission, a tribunal, which kept a close eye on all these matters, because the posties can say, they gave us the right to strike. Last week they get in a big panic, and they take our right to strike away, and they want us meekly to submit. In the final analysis, and this is deadly serious, Parliament's law, which is the law of the people, must be obeyed, or you have total, and I'm not exaggerating one tiny whit, total anarchy in this country. Let's hope that the matter is settled soon. But the way the government has fiddle-faddled since last Thursday, and for the Lord knows how long, there doesn't seem to be any proper idea of it happening yet. So we're stuck with it. Just goes to show you that governments that mess around for month after month after month, giving a right and then taking it away, passing a law which they think is going to be automatically obeyed, don't know what's happening in this country. I hope the CUPW people go back to work, because the law cannot continue to be flouted in the way it is. Talking about the rights of the postal workers, but this morning we're going to talk about your rights. I have here this morning Gordon Fairweather, sometime Tory MP, who is now the Canadian Human Rights Commissioner. And I'm going to question him. He's applying to me for a job. And I'm going to ask him some questions which I'm sure will upset him and offend his sensibilities greatly.
coming back on. Coming back on 1 or 2 shot, eh?
I'm not smoking on the air. I find it a great strain.
Yeah.
Say a few words, sir.
Gordon Fairweather, sometime Tory.
Gordon Fairweather, you are the Chief Commissioner of the Canadian Human Rights Commission.
Tremendous title.
Well, I understand that this is a joke, that you have today disposed of that job and that you're applying to me for a job. Will you accept that hypothesis for a moment?
Anything that you suggest, I accept.
Okay. How old are you? I'm a federal government employer, and I want to question you to decide whether or not you're suitable to be employed in my vast concern. How old are you?
Age has nothing to do with whether I can do a job or not.
Now, you won't tell me your age then?
No.
Are you married?
What's that got to do with whether I do a good job for you or not?
How many children do you have in your family?
I have no children.
Have you ever been on welfare?
But anyway, that's not relevant.
Well, in other words, you won't answer that question.
No, I only answer questions that have to do with whether I can do a good job for you or not.
But
marital status, number of children, and whether I've been in welfare have nothing whatever to do with whether I can do a good job for Jack Webster.
Are you free to travel?
That's not a bad question.
I may ask that question.
That's not a bad question.
Where was your father born?
My father's place of birth has nothing to do with whether I can do a job for Jack Webster.
Well, your mother... I can't ask the next question. You won't tell me where your mother was born either.
Well, I'd like to, because for you it would
I don't want any social chit-chat. I want to know...
This isn't social chit-chat. She was a Scot, and that might mean a lot to you with that accent of yours.
Why I've started in this oddly assorted way to interview a man of your stature is... By the way, how much money did you get as the Chief Commissioner of the Canada Human Rights Commission?
Much more than you suspect I should have.
How much?
I'm a Deputy Minister, second class.
Second class?
Second class, yeah.
Not first class?
No, not first class. They have to test me to see whether I can
How much you get,
perform
Mr.
on this.
Fairweather?
About $56,000.
56, much more than you were making as a Member of Parliament.
Yes.
Now, the reason I asked you this series of rather stupid, perhaps, and impertinent questions is that to the normal majority ethnic group employer, to wit the WASPs by and large, when he interviews somebody for a job, he wants to know all of those things. But you are setting down guidelines. Is it for the whole country or just for the federal government about what questions may not be asked in interviews for job applications?
Yeah, well, first of all, they're guides. I'm not going to give you a semantic argument. They're questions that we think will make employment easier for those who've normally or up to now been denied employment. It's the federal government, the banks, this very television station, because our writ runs to you, believe it or not, CBC, the rival network, Air Canada, Canadian Pacific, all the federally regulated private sector. And
federally regulated private sector. That's railway companies, broadcasting networks, television stations.
Banks will be a big one because of...
Crown corporations of all kinds
indeed.
federally.
Yeah.
And you have set down a brand new set of rules about questions which must not be asked of people.
That's right. Parliament set down the rules, and I listened a minute ago to an editorial you did about the will of Parliament being obeyed. The Parliament gave us the Canadian Human Rights Act. They gave it to us unanimously, which is rather an exceptional piece of legislation. And from that, we thought that employers would like to know the kind of questions that were acceptable.
Now, if I am one of those recalcitrant employers who does not ask acceptable questions, but insist in knowing if a potential woman employee has children, how many she has, and whether they're not in good health, you will throw me in the bucket.
No, I'll apply the Canadian Human Rights Code and suggest to you that there are a lot of those questions that have nothing whatever to do with whether you and I do a good job.
I'm going to get down to the reasons for that, and I have some sympathy with them, but what punishment will you give to me if, as an employer under your guidelines, I insist on asking what you regard as racist or ethnic questions, or questions which are none of my business as a potential employer?
Well, I wouldn't do it. The human rights tribunals that we would set up from a panel of people the government has suggested to us, if they found a discriminatory practice, they could fine you, tell you not to do it again, and so on.
Human Rights Tribunals?
Human Rights Tribunals.
More civil servants?
No, no, by no means civil servants. They're
I mean, we've
private
gone
citizens. As a matter of fact, you might be heading a Human Rights Tribunal if I thought you could be dispassionate.
Which, you know, I can't really be on any given subject at all. But
Yeah.
why? I mean, for the average member of majority groups in this country, they're quite prepared to go into the telephone company or anywhere else, or Air Canada, which is presently asking, I believe some of these companies are presently asking questions which must now be disallowed, are they not?
Yeah, those companies, though, by the way, have asked us to help them interpret the legislation, and this is what we've done.
Now, you're telling me that basically, if I'm seeking an employee for my company in your field of authority, that all I can ask is the name and the qualifications for the job. What else?
Well, the name and the qualifications for the job are really about all you should need to ask, but there are other details. I haven't gone through...
Can I ask if a person is a landed immigrant or legally in this country?
No, you can ask whether a person is able to take a job in Canada.
But they may not know the answer. I mean, many a person crossing the border...
they know very well the answer to that.
Can I ask if somebody has a work permit or not?
Yes, you can ask whether they're entitled to work in this country. There's no problem about that.
But can I say, have you got a work permit from Canada Immigration?
Yeah, I don't... Yes, I think
You would
can
allow
ask
that?
I'd allow that, yeah. I may be in deep trouble because you're asking me...
I mean, I'm using the common sense
Yeah.
point of view. I'm going to hire somebody. First thing I want to know is a little bit about their personal background. And you're telling me that under the human rights federal guidelines, I must not ask any background about my potential employer.
No, you've gone you've taken this much too widely. What we have found is that a lot of these questions are there to screen out people before they even get a chance to prove whether they're good employees or not. We just want to be even-handed. A lot of questions, marital status has nothing to do with whether you can do a good job. Were you asked whether you're married? I don't know whether you're married. It doesn't make any difference to me at all as to whether you're a good host to this program.
Well, you
It's
see,
that type of thing we're trying to
Gordon
avoid.
Fairweather, you're going to have to educate me in
Well,
some
that's what I'm here
considerable
for.
detail.
What do you think I got up at 7 o'clock this morning to come out to this program?
If I'm going
here
to-
on an educational
Okay,
trip.
if I'm going to hire, I'm being not trying to be a Doug Collins. Had him here the other day, and he's something else again. But I'm not trying to be awkward. But if I'm going to hire a girl and she comes in and she's obviously 6 months pregnant, am I not supposed to say, "Are you expecting a child?" Or do I think she's got some inner disease for which she's about to go for surgery? Common sense must surely apply.
The question there would relate to after you decide on her qualifications whether her pregnancy or not her pregnancy would affect her job. We've tried to even this out in the country. There are 3.5 million women in the labor force, if I could put it that way. They're there because they want to share. It's very wasteful for Canadian society not to have had women in the workplace.
Where do they talk?
We've seen a lot of them around here this morning.
Oh, I know. Far too many
Does that
of them.
upset you?
Just a little bit. They're also young. What I'm getting at is there are two forms of applications we're talking about. If I am filling in a form to send to a federal, one of the people in your jurisdiction, do I even have to put my name in it, or can I put my initials on it?
Oh, well, initials are better because some employers, and I'm sorry to say this, we didn't just dream these questions up or these responses. Some employers are put off by the mere using first names.
In other words, if it was J.W. and it's Jack Webster, that sounds like a good, clean wasp type name.
That's right.
Or if it was a late friend of mine, I'm sure if he's listening, he won't mind me using it, Johnny Waslinchuk, I might have a built-in prejudice against the Waslinchuks of the world, and I won't look at his qualifications because his name is Waslinchuk.
That's the perfect. I have now completed my education of Jack Webster. That is the reason for us
that I can understand, that one doesn't want to see rank discrimination, but in the final analysis, surely, the the choice, qualifications being equal, is going to be subject to some
Well, of
bias
course.
in the minds of the
Look,
employer.
I'm human, even though I'm a second-class deputy minister. I can't reform the world. I can't make you like me, or me like you, for that matter.
You can merely set
we
up
might
a-
admire one another, but we're trying to get even-handedness into the workplace.
Okay, Gordon, we'll set up this little blind and we'll go at it again, and we're going to bring in the telephones too, and I'll be fascinated with the reaction
will I, yes.
on your holier-than-thou, pristine, pure attitude to
No, I'm
applications for employment.
just a simple Canadian fulfilling the will of Parliament, and you have just told your listeners that the posties have the obligation to fulfill the law. That's all I'm doing.
And you're telling me
Fulfilling
I've
law.
got the same obligation.
That's exactly right. And so have the people who are going to be phoning in.
What tempted you to make this switch from being an active Tory politician in the House of Commons to a second-class deputy minister? A deputy minister, second class, I'm sorry. See that?
Yeah, that's right.
It's a good example
That's
of how
right,
to
yeah.
twist things.
I was 54. I'd had 25 years, 10 in the province, 15 in Ottawa, and was asked by the Prime Minister to do something about this new commission. It was an irresistible opportunity to lead and set the tone and style, if I can, to the federal initiative here.
How long have you been in operation?
1st of March this year.
What's the difference between this and the Human Rights Bill of old Johnny Deef?
Well, Johnny Deef that's a great human rights bill. It would be better if it was entrenched in our Constitution. We're really an anti-discrimination and employment branch. The human rights is a rather inflated title, but as you know, politicians occasionally use inflated language.
How many civil servants have you got working for you?
About 60, but it's a big country. It'll cost you, Jack, 3 cents.
You're giving the old CBC argument.
No, I get this argument from people on this and other networks. It's it's $3,800,000 is our budget.
Now, apart from telling people how to ask questions when they're employing others, do you take complaints of discrimination in the federal service?
Indeed, we do.
All of the federal service?
Yes, indeed.
Do you get any?
Indeed, we've had about 2,500 complaints since the 1st of March.
What are the commonest complaints you get?
In Toronto and Vancouver, and I'm sorry to say this, but I have to, they're race and national and ethnic origin. In the rest of the country, they have to do with sex and marital status.
Race?
Women being
What do you mean race? You mean it comes from
let's
colored
say it
people?
as it is.
Comes from colored people?
Colored people, brown people, black people, yellow people, white people who have been denied employment opportunities for artificial reasons.
And do you investigate each and every one of these complaints?
We try to. Yes, we do.
You're, just as a local reference, therefore, you're the national Kathleen Ruff.
I'm the national Kathleen Ruff, and I couldn't have a more complimentary thing said to me today.
You're sold in Kathy, are you?
I'm sold on a dedicated public servant who's trying to obey the law of British Columbia.
All right, now what are the things which are, well, some people think she oversteps it, but that's for another case.
Well, good heavens, some of us have to overstep something once in a while to make fairness in the
Do you not find
society.
that many of these questions of racial discrimination from whichever side they come are purely a question of not so much jealousy, but inability to get the job because of lack of qualifications?
If that's the case, then we dismiss the complaint. Mostly it has to do with the fear. Race is really fear, in a way, and jealousy and so on. There are all sorts of reasons for this. These are days of high unemployment, as we know, and
Have you any
people
specific cases where you've nailed somebody to the wall for saying, I'm not going to hire you, you're from Hong Kong or Taiwan or Bangladesh or Glasgow?
I haven't nailed them, but I have nailed people who have discharged people for physical handicap. I have conciliated a case. I sounds arrogant. It isn't.
No.
We, the royal we, a case where a Jewish woman wanted to keep her sundown laws, and one of the large banks accommodated her religious belief. Very important change that we brought about, but that's a one-to-one thing.
But in other words, they agreed to give her the service she required because of...
That's right, and she'll work at other times, you know, make up the time.
You see, yes, Shabbat Shalom bit. Saturday night, Sunday night, Friday night, Saturday night.
Well, I don't think any bank is open Saturday night, but...
Now, okay, I want you to run down, before I go to the phones, the precise areas of questioning which are forbidden to employers in your fields. Because it really cuts out a hell of a lot of, if you'll forgive me, normal type questions among wasps.
Yeah, but they're normal because they've been part of our cultural heritage and they're not relevant. For example, physical handicap, the only question permissible there has to do with whether the person is able to do the job, or whether he hazards his or her fellow employees.
The guy with one arm and one leg.
Yeah. Religion, for instance, the only question there would be an inquiry as to willingness to work a specified work schedule. That would be agreeable.
You mean setting holidays?
That's right.
Okay,
yeah.
Next one?
Well, the next one, military. Acceptable is inquiry into Canadian military service, because people have screened out other people because they may have been in the military service of other countries.
In other words,
that's not relevant anymore because those people have made a commitment to our country.
I want to make that clear to people, though.
Yeah.
In other words, I can't say to a guy, which army were you in the last war? Oh, you were the Germans.
Yeah.
Don't like the Germans.
Right.
You're finished.
Yeah.
Eh?
That's right.
Next
marital status, the question we would like to have asked is, are you willing to travel or be transferred to other areas of the province or country?
Can I suggest an alteration in that?
All right.
Of course the woman with 19 children is willing to travel or be transferred, but the question is, are you free to travel? Will your husband let you if you're married?
That's
discrimination.
We may take some education from you this morning, but the question we have accepted, these are guides, and we're a rather flexible organization. They're not in stone. Nothing we do is carved in stone. You want another? National or ethnic origin. Yeah. The question that's acceptable is, are you legally entitled to work in Canada? Inquiry as to birthplace, nationality of parents or grandparents has nothing to do with whether you
It's not that many years since in the Canadian census we used to show ourselves as Scotch and English and Irish when in fact we were supposed to be Canadians.
That's right.
Now, on this question of eligibility to work in Canada, you can't demand proof on the first application. You can only demand that later on?
Yes, well, in many cases, again, people would be screened out, we think, if their eligibility to work in Canada was made a prerequisite. A lot of these questions, you know, can be asked once the hiring has taken place.
What's the point of asking them once the hiring has taken place?
Because there wouldn't be artificial screening out just because of a lot of...
I may hire the woman and suddenly find that she says, well, no, my husband won't let me travel. I can't go out of town.
That isn't... Now, come on, you're trying to put something in my mouth. You're good at this, but you're not going to do it to me.
No, I'm only giving you the common sense thing. I mean, no discrimination. You suddenly hire a woman, you give her the job, or hire a man, you suddenly find that, no, he's not free to travel.
No, I have said that acceptable is, are you free to travel? That's an acceptable question. But there may be matters having to do with physical handicaps, obviously, that need to be asked because of washroom facilities, availability of elevators, and so on. We have, for example, the Winnipeg, I'm being safe and neutral here, the Winnipeg International Airport. Winnipeg is hosting a World Congress of the Physically Handicapped, and yet many of them can't get in and out of that airport. You know, there are all sorts of things in this area that we have to change public attitudes. That airport's done by superb architects, but those architects neglected a very important part of our population, those who are in wheelchairs or who are blind.
Okay, you can take the heat from now, Gordon, and I
Okay,
suspect you will take some considerable heat on the telephone.
I can't believe any heat from
people
BC.
still don't understand what you're up to.
Of course they don't. Okay, I'll take the heat.
Gordon Fairweather, Chief Commissioner, Canadian Human Rights. Do you wish, is it your desire or your authority to tell all employers that they should all follow your guidelines?
No, we have been asked to suggest guidelines. We've done this, and if some of them prove unworkable, we'll like to hear about them and we'll change them.
But I asked you a simple question, Gordon.
I gave
and
you a
didn't know.
very straightforward
answer. No, you didn't. Is it your desire that all employers should carry out the restricted questioning based on name and job qualification alone, with the other things to be straightened out if necessary after hiring?
Correct. That's exactly what I want people to do.
Thank you. Go ahead, please, to Gordon Fairweather.
Fairweather, a comment and a question. My comment is that the questions asked during pre-hiring interviews would seem to be a two-way street, and by following your guidelines, a prospective employee now becomes hired and bears the full brunt of the prejudice that an employer may have, because he's had to hide it. And I find out to my dismay that after going through all the rigmarole and the cost of finding a job, that I don't really want it because he's down on me, which I can only find out after I'm in his employ. Now, my question is that as a retired employee from a Crown corporation, what you seem to be saying is that I may now go back and reapply for a job with that Crown corporation, because the fact that I'm pensioned off has nothing to do with whether I may perform a good service for him in the future. Is that true?
Well, what we're saying is age isn't a relevant question. Age is a proscribed discriminatory practice. But, you know, we don't say that by following these guidelines, every employer is going to be Simon Pure.
No, but he's got a very specific point to you.
Well,
he is now a pensioned employee.
Yeah.
During an interview, can I ask a man, one, if he's over 65, or two, drawing a pension from the federal government at the moment?
No, you can't. Well, you could ask him if he's over 65, because age is usually defined as 18 to 65.
But that's discrimination. We just did a ruling here in the BC Labour Relations Board.
I saw the ruling, and I honor it, and I hope that the Canadian Human Rights Commission can follow it. But we're not quite as up-to-date in the nation as you are in BC about age.
I cannot ask a man if he has previously worked for the federal government and draws a pension from the federal government before if I'm thinking about rehiring somebody.
No, what's that got to do with whether
He
he's
may
a
have
good
been
job or
fired
not?
10 times.
Well, yeah.
How do I get his work record?
He'll have the work record is part of.
Oh, I see. I can ask that.
Yeah, certainly.
Where did you work? How long were you there? Why were you fired? I can ask that.
Certainly. We're not as out to lunch as you think.
No,
we are.
that was my mistake.
The present rule that that I cannot be rehired because I'm being pensioned off can no longer apply then?
I don't recognize that this is the present rule. Is that in that particular Crown Corporation that they won't rehire pensioners?
That's right. You cannot work again for that company. When
How old
Well,
are they?
then they'd like to hear about the Canadian Human Rights Act, and we have an educating job to do with that Crown Corporation.
Which Crown Corporation are we talking about, if you'd care to tell me?
Air Canada.
Air Canada.
Yeah, you sound to me like somebody who's flown me across the country. Is that correct?
Not exactly, no.
No, you're not a
I
pilot
get
or
you there, but
navigator.
not flown you.
Should he complain to you now in writing?
I'd love to hear from him. If he doesn't want to do it to me because of the postal strike, he can do it in our BC office at 750 Cambie Street, 5th floor. The number is 666-1241.
How long has that been open?
That's been open a couple of months.
Let me know how you get on, caller. From Victoria, go ahead, please. Where are you?
Hello?
That's
Yes.
you, sir.
Yes, apropos of the first question that Mr. Webster asked Mr. Fairweather, how old are you?
You want to know how old I am?
No, I don't want to ask that, but this what I'm about to tell you is apropos.
All right, fine. Because I'm glad to tell you I'm 55. But
Don't look a day more than
I
60.
know, yeah.
No.
In fact, several of them.
Go and ask them then.
I
Ask
have
it.
a 50-word reply from the bank, which was pretty standard from most of them. Thank you for your recent resume forwarded through Mr. Jones, Manager, Market Development. While your qualifications are very impressive, it would appear that we are unable to utilize your extensive background. Like most banks, we promote from within our organization, which normally causes openings to occur at the more junior levels.
Now, are you asking if that's discrimination?
Yes, does that not sound like to you?
That sounds very like a very neat way around age discrimination, and I think that complaint should be put to us. I can't accept complaints on the television, but
No.
it's the kind of thing we want to hear about. It's covert discrimination.
But the bank could have written and said, sorry, sir, we have no vacancy which fits your qualifications. Wham, all finished, and that would be it.
That would be it, although if the bank did that with the 9 prescribed grounds, we might monitor their last 1,000 hirings and see whether they're representative.
With the 9 prescribed grounds?
Yeah, we would want to know how many blacks or browns or women the bank is hiring and promoting.
Oh, are you on the
Oh,
quota
indeed.
kick? Are you on the
no,
quota
I'm
kick?
not on the quota kick. I'm on the representative kick.
What's the difference?
Quota, we think that quotas are restrictive. For example, in our commission, without quotas, we've hired about 65% of our staff are women. Had we had quotas, there wouldn't have been as many women employed.
Sounds like reverse discrimination, doesn't it? When
Does
there's only a
indeed,
breadwinner
yeah.
out of a job.
Yes,
A
but-
breadwinner, of course, is an evil word, isn't it?
No, but a breadwinner can be a woman, can't it? Can't he, she? Why not?
The 9
Anyway, women have the right to work.
Well, I know that.
yeah.
Maybe some of them shouldn't be working, but that's beside the point. I mean, these pin money women are pin money couples where they're both making big money and both drawing unemployment insurance while the working single woman with the kids is starving to death really annoys me, but that's a question of egalitarianism that we can't solve, isn't it?
Well, we can't in the next 10 minutes.
Your 9 proposed grounds and your representation, do you have figures you aim at? Can you tell me what the proportion is for
No,
women?
we don't have figures, and I'm not getting into Doug Collins' trap here. I'll tell you what we don't think is very good, and that is that, for instance, with a very large black population, very old, Nova Scotia, only 100 of the 35,000 blacks in Nova Scotia work for the government of Canada out of 9,000 people.
You've sold me. That's obviously bad
Yeah.
discrimination, which must be corrected.
The other is Indian people in the Northwest Territories. Around 4% of the jobs in the North are held by Indian people. My God, it's their country. They live there. Why shouldn't they work there?
And they're run by alien colonizers.
Well,
That's my phrase.
You said it, yes. You
But
said
that black thing in Nova Scotia is very bad indeed.
it. Yeah. But what I find, Jack, is that people, if you put calmly issues like that most Canadians understand it and are willing to have us do
I think you have
something about
two good points there. Next call will be from Chilliwack. One of the people working on the show.
It's a great one.
Okay, you've sold me on the case of black discrimination by sheer neglect in Nova Scotia, right?
Yeah.
You've sold me probably on the case of Indian discrimination because of lack of education opportunity and the alien colonizers from Ottawa. So therefore, you, not to be difficult, but obviously what you'd like to see is people hired without the necessary qualifications, not on a merit basis, to make sure these people are properly represented.
Yeah, but
As
merit...
maybe they should be.
Yeah, merit has been a sacred cow to prevent a lot of people. Merit was introduced into the public service in 1917 to end patronage, a terrible word, patronage. I think merit should include representativeness. That's all.
Well, the Nova Scotia case, you can sell it on that one alone.
Yeah, that's right.
Your parables are good. Generally speaking, people will think you're an interfering busybody and bureaucrat.
Oh, I know that, but they thought of me as that way as an MP, so here I am. A very kind person said all I've done is move from one constituency to the country. It's a very
May well be true.
touching...
You're not the ombudsman, you're just a human rights man. Go ahead from Chilliwack.
Good morning, Jack.
Morning.
I'd like to give you a bouquet of roses on your comment this morning regards of the postal workers.
Fair enough, but let's get on to business.
Well, that was my comment that, I mean, it's nice for them to give them the right to strike and then turn around and take the right away from them. In other words, they're going to give us the right to vote. They're going to take the right for us vote away from us if they...
You got to keep an eye on these politicians, as Gordon Wells knows. Thanks, ma'am. Go ahead, please.
Yes, good morning. One beef that I really have about employers is when they have this here clause in the application for a job. Have you had any serious illness in the last 5 years? And if you happen to put down, yes, I've had cancer, you're automatically discriminated against.
Now, how do you protect people in that case, Gordon?
Well, I think this is so serious that if you don't mind, I'll take 1 second or two to say it.
Please do.
But a medical exam will reveal prohibited information about an applicant, such as his or her age, race, or sex. And for this reason, employers would normally conduct these medical exams after the hiring decision is made. And we have found, since our guides went out, that employers say that's indeed correct, because they don't want to have to go through medical exams for every applicant. They do it after hiring. A specific question like cancer, provided, well, our definition of physical handicap is a controlled illness. Now, thank God, many forms of cancer are controlled illnesses, and therefore the person should be
So
hired.
therefore, on initial application for a job within your jurisdiction, you cannot ask for a medical history.
Well, the medical history comes after the hiring takes
After hiring.
place. Yeah.
But you can't even say, have you had a serious illness in the past 5 years?
No.
Now, did you run into this, ma'am, somewhere?
Yes, I did.
With which corporation?
Vancouver School Board.
And because you'd had that, you feel that was the reason you were discriminated against?
Yes.
Now, that's Kathleen Ruff, isn't it?
That's Kathleen Ruff, and I have to show all your listeners that as a second-class deputy minister, I don't know whether physical handicap is in the BC code. You know, I try to
Sure
keep
it
all
is.
the 10 provinces straight, but the legislation differs in all the 10, so I'm exposed.
Nobody said to you you were not being hired because of the history of cancer, did they?
No.
That's just your feeling.
Well, when I was told about the job opening, I was told I was very well qualified for it, right? And at the time, I was on welfare, right? And I was more or less obligated to apply for that job. I was told either you apply for it or else, right? Okay, and they said I was qualified and the opening was there. I should be able, there was no doubt that I would get the job.
Well, your suspicions are probably correct, but what you must do is chase it up with Kathleen Ruff.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead to Gordon Fairweather.
Good morning, gentlemen, and welcome to British Columbia, Mr. Fairweather.
Thank you.
There are 3 fast things I would like to ask. I'm talking about a local school board, too. They require your birth certificate and your marriage certificate. And when you leave the job, they also require your previous name before you were married. And the last one I object to is children that want to play hockey. No matter if they're 8 or 9 years old, they have to get a social security number or they're not allowed to play hockey. And you can imagine how hard it is getting Ottawa to send you a social security number for a child.
Just a minute, just hold your breath. The first thing is Kathleen Ruff again. What's this about a social security number to play hockey?
I've heard of this and I'm appalled. We're getting into social security numbers for school libraries, school lunch programs. I'm, as a person interested in human rights and civil liberties, I'm appalled if we're to become a 9-digit society. There are areas that social insurance worked quite well in keeping track of income for income tax, employment records and so on, but as to whether children should play sports or have books from school libraries, it's preposterous.
That to me. Are you telling me you've heard of this?
I am sorry to tell you that we have had complaints from parents whose children have to get a social insurance number in order to participate in school programs.
Why?
Well, why? I can't imagine why. It's because we're getting lazy. We'd prefer a series of numbers than Jack Webster. I don't know what...
Is this to computerize the programs?
Yes, and the problem there is that the computer information, unless we keep the information watertight in various watertight compartments, somebody someday will know whether I return the books to the library if they want to know whether I'd paid my income tax. In other words, irrelevant information.
Or if you've ever had treatment for a nervous breakdown.
A mental illness, exactly, yeah.
Ma'am, I'll follow up on that. That sounds to me like a piece of arrogant stupidity.
Well, you can call out and...
Which school board are you talking about?
Beg your pardon?
Which school board?
Oh, District 42, that's in the Maple Ridge, and also for your hockey is in the Maple Ridge area. And I find it sad because children like to play hockey, and quite often, if you have children...
Thank you very much indeed. Gordon, stick around. You're going to have a very hard job to sell your case, you know.
Certainly.
How long is your appointment, by the way, as Canada Human Rights Commission?
5 years. 1 year's already up, so I'm on the countdown now.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, good morning.
Morning.
Hello?
Speak up. Yes, yes, ma'am, that's you.
Yes. Mr. Fairweather, you're saying that you're trying to come up with some sort of law against prejudice and against a person's religion or their color or stuff like that. What about what a person looks like?
Well, that, too, can be, for instance, if you look at me, are you watching television?
Yeah, I see you.
Well, you can see that I'm overweight, and we have to decide whether weight is a physical handicap in employment. I'm allowed to get on Jack Webster because I have a very fancy title.
I'm not going to hire you as a roofer, though.
No, or you probably wouldn't hire me on the railway because you'd be troubled by my...
Well, what I'm trying to get at is I went down to one company. I'd found out they were hiring. I phoned the company every third day. I talked to 3 different supervisors. I found out that they were hiring. I was told to go down and talk to one particular gentleman down there that was in charge of the hiring. I went down. He took one look at me. I have had acne since I was 13. There's nothing the doctors can do about it. It's just something that's got to work its way out. And told me that they were no longer hiring. I phoned back 2 days later, talked to another supervisor, asked the woman what was going on. She said they just hired 2 girls prior. Now, I was told that I wasn't hired because I had not had factory work.
And it was because of your acne.
Told me these 2 girls were hired, and I could believe her. They've never seen the inside of a factory.
Do you want me to give you the answer in the federal area? And if you were listening, watching this program, that type of treatment is now prohibited. Nobody could refuse to hire you because of your acne.
Oh, I agree with you, and I sympathize with the girl fully, but the fact remains, as you well know, if 2 women come in to get a job in an office downtown, federal or not, the young chipper one of 22 will get it before the 55-year-old woman whose husband has just left her.
Indeed, I've told you on this hour that I can't reform the...
You can't reform the human race.
No, but artificial barriers like the one the young woman spoke about, if we know about it, we'll try to deal with it.
Best of luck, ma'am. Go ahead, please.
Good morning.
Morning.
Yes, there are. I'm afraid there's still many forms of discrimination, still pretty prevalent. An old application for employment for women only indicates. Do you have? To what extent do you use alcohol or drugs?
When was that form used, ma'am?
It was used some time ago, thank goodness. But
You mean 10 years ago?
The question still is there.
Well, the question would not be on any employment form in the federal agency anymore.
Well, this is a federal agent.
Well, tell us which agency was it? And we'll see that it's dealt with.
It is a bank that it's been dealt with, and a gentleman who has 8 years. He's 8 years a recovering alcoholic, and he just got a very negative reply.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was 8 years ago.
No.
When did this happen?
This was very recently that this person applied for a position, and
he was asked questions about being a recovered alcoholic.
Yes, and he has...
Well, look, I think that one of the great Canadian banking systems should be more sensitive about their employment practices. Yes. We're all part of rehabilitating alcoholics and others. The banks have a responsibility as well as the rest of us. They're making a lot of money and should do better than they
I don't believe banks have any a form of rehabilitation for people.
No, but society has, and banks are part of society.
Go ahead from Wells, BC.
Good morning.
Morning.
And good morning, Gordon.
Good morning. Who's this? Do you want a job?
I voted for you in '51 when you went to the provincial house in New Brunswick, so I worked right around the corner from you, matter of fact.
Have you been disappointed? Did you make a mistake?
About a fine now. I had to pay a double. And I have a letter here. It says, further to your letter, dated...
Never mind that. What are you talking about?
I'm talking about a fine, $200 fine I paid.
Why were you fined?
3 years ago, and
Why were you fined?
And I paid it, and I had to pay it double.
Why were you fined?
Beg your pardon?
What were you fined for?
Impaired driving.
Well, that's your problem. I'm sorry, even though you're a friend of Gordon, we're not dealing with impaired driving this morning, are we, Gordon?
No.
From Wells, BC, to tell me he paid a fine double. Well, he can take it up with the Attorney General or whatever. Go ahead, please. Hello there.
Good morning.
Morning, ma'am. Rapid change of tone of voice. Good morning, ma'am.
Mr. Fairweather?
Yes? Did you vote for me?
My question is with transfers. You were talking about, women having the ability to transfer. And I found that in my experience, the question that is more often asked is, will your husband be transferred in his job? And will there be any protection for these types of women?
With these kinds of cases, look, we recognize that they're in husband and wife situations. There will be problems when one or other of the partners get transferred. I haven't any quick and glib answer to that one. I just realized that
she either goes with them or she stays there.
Yeah.
No, but this is but Mr. Webster, this is very, very common. The husband, if he may be transferred. He may be transferred 20 years from now, but then these women are not looked at for jobs, and it's very, very common.
Yeah. Well.
Well, I told Jack I'm being educated, and you've just told me of a situation that obviously we need more information about.
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Good morning.
Morning.
Mr. Fairweather, am I to understand that what you said was that the regulations or guidelines only apply to the employment of an individual?
Well, we're an anti-discrimination agency in employment, yes. I don't, is there a...
Well, the reason I question this, as a former civil servant and retired, as you know, probably better than I do, I am not allowed to go back and work in the government.
Oh, no, there's no bar to you applying again, is there now, Mr. Fairweather, even though it does
well,
seem...
Look, you may have me in serious trouble here. Age is a proscribed ground of discrimination. If you're on some sort of federal superannuation, that law, may affect your employment.
You do allow discrimination if you're 65 and over.
Well, you're putting it that way to me. It's no.
You don't.
Discrimination against people 65
just hold on a
and over
second.
then.
Hold on.
Just a minute. Webster and I are trying to sort this one out.
If you're over 65, you have no protection under these guidelines.
No.
That's clear.
That's clear, but we want to change
Gordon
that.
Fairweather, the best of luck in changing the thing that matters, the attitude in people's minds.
That's correct.
Gordon Fairweather.
Are you going to do me? Thank you.
You're going to ready if you like. How much time have I got? 50 seconds, that's all.
Good morning, good morning, good morning, Mike. Good morning.
Hey, what's your name again? Suzanne? Chemo's girlfriend? Must tell you about. I found Gordon Fairweather quite informative, and as I said with my usual great wisdom at the end, you won't really solve the problem until you change the attitudes in people's minds. But there are now questions you can't be asked for these federal-type jobs. Now, I didn't get a chance to take reaction on the mail strike, on my comments on the mail strike, and all I said, in case you missed it, was, passed a law last week, it's supposed to obey the law, nothing happens, it's going to be Lord knows how long. Linda, how's your cold?
Much better, thank
Much
you.
better. You
Yes.
can now speak again.
Just about.
Tomorrow, what?
Premier Bennett.
Premier Bill Bennett.
That's right.
Live and in living color in the studio tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. precisely, more or less, I should imagine.
Yes.
Bill Bennett, tomorrow morning. We'll cover the whole gamut, a range of the federal, the provincial problems at 9 a.m. precisely.